Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. We've got a great episode today. I'm talking to Roy Huntington because it's hotter than hell right now in most of the country, and lots of you will be heading to the creeks and lakes and rivers to go boating, skiing, fishing, and whatever else, just hanging out on the water. So we're going to talk about ways to keep your precious firearm safe on the water. Before we get started, let's hear a real quick word from our great sponsors. Creedmoor Sports is your destination for all things precision shooting. Whether you're new to the sport, an experienced target shooter, or a die-hard competitive shooter, Creedmoor Sports has what you need to take your game to the next level. Visit creedmoorsports.com. Introducing the 4Patriots Solar Go Fridge, a revolutionary solar-powered fridge on wheels that can protect your food, drinks, and medicine during power outages. This is not an ordinary cooler. The Solar Go Fridge is a refrigerator, freezer, and deep freezer all in one. It can recharge for free in sunlight and even power your phone in a pinch. Plus, its portable design means you can take it with you anywhere, ensuring your essentials stay safe and cool while camping, fishing, and hunting. Right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use the code GUNMAG to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the amazing Solar Go Fridge. Don't let a power outage catch you off guard. Just go to 4patriots.com and use the code GUNMAG to get 10% off. Well, hi there again, Roy. Welcome to yet another episode of the Guns Magazine podcast featuring Roy Huntington.
Well, it's always fun, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, today is a timely topic because it's hotter than hammered hell in most of the country here in the waning stages of the summer. Actually, I'd say we're more in the peak of summer. And I know at both our houses, it's going to be stupidly hot. So what does that mean when it gets hot? Everybody heads to the water. So I thought we'd talk about carrying your gun on the water. And both of us have a lot of experience doing that. We'll talk about in a minute. You were on the harbor patrol and did all kinds of cool stuff in Southern California. They should have made a TV show about that. And I am an avowed avid boater, fisherman. I do everything from, I used to whitewater kayak, but I still do some sit on top. I've got a paddling cataraft that is pretty fun, and I've got a big center console boat that I take out on the ocean or up in the Great Lakes for salmon fishing. And in the meantime, I go wading a lot for smallmouth bass, which I've slowed down since I've had the knee replacement because I'm not sure falling on a slime-slickened rock and bashing that new knee would be a good thing. So I look pretty odd with my knee protector and the brace and all that stuff. But anyway, in all those adventures, I generally carry a gun, and I know Roy kayaks too. So let's just talk about that for folks that are heading out on the water. So Roy, okay, we got to start with, you hold the trump card here. You work the harbor patrol. You rode jet skis and got paid for it. Really?
I know. It's a little embarrassing, actually. We actually were one of the founding agencies, I guess you'd call it, and we worked with Yamaha in the very early days of sit-on wave runners as opposed to jet skis that you stand up on. And because we just said, you know what, I think that we could use these for patrol. And the Yamaha went, really? And so we got some of the very earliest loaner ones, and then we developed a program and we put them to work out on Mission Bay, and actually they worked really, really good. And but after we were done messing with them and kind of learning how to ride them and stuff like that, we thought, well, how are we going to carry equipment? Because we're not lifeguards. And so we have to be armed and we have to be ready, to be able to do things. And so we went through a lot of iterations because, we had been driving police boats for years. And I learned quickly, if you have a blued gun, you have to clean it every day that you come off from the water, one day. It will get rusty. And
not just wipe down. It's a full clean. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a full cleaning. And so I eventually hard chromed my duty sig and hard chromed the magazines. And so that helped a lot. So we were thinking, okay, so now let's translate that into sitting on jet skis on the water and getting, wet and sprayed with spray. How are we going to do it? So we did a lot of experimenting, and we we quit wearing life jackets and we went to float coats, they're called. So that it kind of looked like just a jacket and had a badge sewn on it, and then the inside of that had pockets. Well, we learned right away, though, that you can't just put the gun inside of there because it'll still going to get wet. It comes down your collar and all that stuff. So what we eventually did was we just had gallon plastic bags, Ziploc baggies. And we got a bunch of stainless steel Ruger P85s issued to us from the range, which were not then really issued guns, but they had them. And so we got those, and then so we would put it in a Ziploc baggie and put it in one of the inside pockets, and then we had zip ties with us for handcuffs, and then our portable radios we would put in a zip bag in the other inside pocket, and then run a ear thing up like a 99-cent disposable ear thing, and wear that underneath, because we used to wear a lightweight helmet when we were on them. And that was essentially it. And then they had a little storage compartment, and we would keep an expandable baton in there and some first aid gear and whatever other. But it actually worked. The problem was the bags would sweat, and so you still kind of ended up having to clean the guns. But so that's one extreme, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And the other thing, as you had mentioned, is I go kayaking here on the rivers, and it's like, no, I'm not paranoid, but I am careful, and so I carry my Ruger LCP Max, and I have a little plastic, those little plastic watertight containers that you have.
Yeah.
And so I just put it in there with a spare magazine, and I put it in the little console that's on the kayak. And then, it's not fast draw, but at least you have it, and you don't violate rule 1, which is have a gun.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of, I've got a couple of stories I could tell, and I may get to here in a minute, but I think that's the big thing, the overarching consideration that I would give folks when we're talking about this is the fact that if you take a gun, which you should do as a prepared American, if you take it outdoors, it's going to get wet. It's not in a worst case, it will get wet. There's sweat, condensation, humidity, fresh water, salt water. Salt water is stunning. It will, seems to be the most corrosive substance known to man. So if you decide to carry a gun outdoors, which you should, and on the water, just realize it's going to get wet. So operate from that theory from the start, that when this gets wet, I will do X, Y, Z or whatever, and I'll try to protect it from being wet. But part B of that, I guess the end result of that is, as you said, you got to take care of your guns, especially if you're near salt water, because it's going to eat them alive. And even forgetting one day of cleaning a gun, especially if it's actually gotten wet, it'll be a sad day in the gun cleaning room. I can guarantee you. Not that I've ever done that before.
Well, remember in the old days, they used to say, "Oh, I just use that. That's my fishing tackle gun." Fishing box, tackle box gun. Or that one bounces around on the bottom of my boat. I went squirrel hunting on the Verdigris River in Oklahoma a long time ago with some Oklahoma Fish and Game wardens, and all of them had essentially the same gun, and it was an old hot metal RG, either a 38 or a 22, and they kept it in their overall middle pocket. Well, of course, the lesson there is that these guys do this every day. They don't have their really nice duty gun there.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a reason God made high points and, stainless steel Taurus revolvers and stainless steel Charter Arm revolvers, and the $99 used something that Rossi that you picked up at the pawn shop that's a 40-year-old gun. Don't take your $5,000 Nighthawk Custom, because as Brent says, it is going to get wet.
Absolutely.
So, and the other thing you might think about is, especially if you're fishing like Brent's talking about, is keep the first shot or two, if it's like a 38 or something, full of shot cartridges, because it's pretty handy, for a snake or something like that. And you can, if you really need to use it to dispatch a big fish on your boat or something, that a muzzle contact with a shot cartridge does it. And that's a lot safer than shooting a bullet on your boat.
Yep. Exactly. Well, I was laughing too when you talked about gallon Ziploc bags. That is probably my number one outdoor accessory. It doesn't matter what you're doing, hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, whatever. And it doesn't matter what kind of equipment you're talking about. A gallon free, and I always use freezer bags because they're a little heavier plastic.
Yep.
Wrap your gun in it, wrap your cell phone in it. Optics, I've used them for optics a lot because even though it may be fog proof, some rainwater on your couple $100 rangefinder is not a good thing, and it keeps dust off too. So it's a dual purpose item. But the big kicker is if you're extremely cheap and frugal, don't be when it comes to bags. After you've used it once or twice, 86 it or repurpose it in your shop or something, but don't keep carrying your gun or your phone in it because just like you will always get a gun wet when you go outdoors, your bag will spring a leak. So
That's true.
Yeah,
The
don't
other
do that.
thing, I thought I was going to be really clever, and I have one of those vacuum bags like used
Yeah.
for sealing meat and all that kind of stuff. Well, I saw it one day and I said, boy, I just solved my problem, of how you carry a gun on your kayak. And so I put my gun in there and I vacuum sealed it, and I was so proud of it and everything. And then I was looking at it and I thought, yeah, but how do I get it open? It's like you need to have a knife to cut the plastic or a piece of, and so yes, it's waterproof and you could drop it and you could sink to the bottom and it'd still be fine. But unlike a Ziploc baggie that you can peel open, you can't get that. Maybe for some other things it'd make a good idea. I don't know. If you really have to have your wallet with you out there and you don't want to buy a plastic waterproof container, maybe you could vacuum seal your wallet.
Yeah. Well, and you bring that up. There are special made pouches, and I've found that they last a lot longer than Ziploc bags. But having said that, they still fail too. I learned that lesson the hard way with a cell phone of mine. I had it hanging around my neck. I was out waiting, and of course, I tripped in a deeper spot, so I went completely underwater. And when I came up, I thought, okay, my gun's going to be wet, and my cell phone should be protected. All that pouch did was turn into an aquarium. I couldn't get my phone out fast enough because somewhere along the line, after a season of hard use, it had developed a pinhole, and the water went in. So if you go outdoors, anything sensitive, electronics, and even your wallet. I always wrap my wallet too because I'm going to get wet, and I try not to, have everything in my wallet get wet. But we're talking about guns here. If you go outdoors, 110% chance it's going to get wet. So just plan on it. So moving on to a different topic is construction. And I've learned my lesson the hard way. I've actually seen a tackle box gun. It was a blued revolver, and I don't even remember the specifics, but yeah, I keep a revolver in my tackle box. It's like, how long's that been in there? Since last season.
Yeah.
It's a boat anchor now. So blued guns in the outdoors, I know guys have carried them for millennium since they've invented, guns, but blued guns in the outdoor are not the A answer. I always typically, especially if it's freshwater, I just carry my, Glock or something like that has all the, it's a polymer 9. So they're not rust proof, but they are more rust resistant. And I don't place any faith in stainless, especially around salt water or perspiration. Something to keep in mind because stainless steel is rust resistant. It is not rust proof. So don't make that mistake the hard way. Bottom line is the gun's going to get wet. So it'll buy you a little time, especially carrying a polymer type gun, but none of them are foolproof. And let's go back to what Roy said. And I think I've said too, if you go a day without cleaning, you'll be really sorry.
I think one of the first questions you can ask yourself is, first of all, do you need to have a gun where you're going? If I'm going swimming in our swimming pool, I probably am not going to have a gun. Now, there's a gun in the Easy Go that's parked nearby, right? But I'm not going to wear it in my, bathing suit. So evaluate the situation, I think, and look at what you're trying to do. And then the second decision is, how much gun do you need? Do you need a full police reload when you're fly fishing, probably not. Are you in Alaska salmon fishing and you might have to take on a bear? Well, then, yeah, you need a bigger gun and maybe a reload. I don't know. But I think it's real situationally dependent. For me, if I'm kayaking, I mean, I feel confident and comfortable having the small Ruger LCP Max in one of those hard plastic containers. I gotta say, I agree, Brent. I used to use those soft roll up waterproof containers, until they weren't.
Yeah.
And when I started to buy the small waterproof plastic containers, like little miniature Pelican cases, those kind of things,
Yeah.
well, not only do they take care of the knocks and bumps and crashes that always happen, but they really do work. And I like them too because almost always they float. So if you drop your gun over the side in a Ziploc baggie, it's gonna sink. you know, but if you fumble getting your phone out or something, as you go for it, it's gonna float next to you and you paddle over and get it. So
Yeah. Well, when you talk about whether to carry or not, I'm pretty much 100% guy. I've had two interesting experiences. The first of which was I was wading a well-known creek in our state, and I was in the middle of basically a state park and some Forest Service land, and I came around the bend and, well, look, there's a group of people on the shoreline. It was literally an outlaw biker gang that had decided to go canoeing, and they went to the canoe livery that was in this stretch of river, and they had pulled over and were engaging in various and sundry atrocities and eating and drinking and all that stuff. And I didn't have any problem. I just stayed to the other side of the creek. How you doing, guys and gals? But the point to that story is, had I said, well, I need to arm myself in case I run across a biker gang, literally 2 miles from a road, you're a little paranoid. Well, then lo and behold, it actually happened to me. So, again, I'm not disparaging outlaw biker gangs. You've got your place in the world, but it just, I wouldn't have anticipated running into people that could potentially be a problem that far back in the middle of nowhere. And I honestly forgot the second one. Other than I think I told the story once before. I was sea kayaking down in Florida in the Panhandle, and I was in a green 12-foot kayak, and the 8-foot gator that swam up close enough. I mean, I could hear it breathing, and Mr. Outdoor guy, I'm like, okay, don't panic. It's cool, blah, blah. So he swam by me and then he stopped and he did that thing where they turn and don't make any ripple in the water. And he's staring at me and I can see his eye moving. I'm like, oh boy. And I thought, I need to get my pistol just in case. Now, a handgun against a gator that's got you in its jaws is not the optimal response, but it's better than nothing. And then I realized I had left my gun in the car intentionally because I was afraid whatever I was carrying at that point, I was afraid it and seawater wouldn't mix. So again, that was one of those things I couldn't have predicted ever happening. And from now on, even when I'm sea kayaking out in the middle of nowhere, I'm going to take a gun with me. So just a couple of examples of why I always carry a gun no matter what. Oh, I remember what the other one was, if I can go ahead. I was, again, wade fishing in a stream, and I had taken my GoPro, and I wanted a cool time-lapse shot of the sun kind of going over the creek and starting to set and all that. So I'm way back away from a road. I'm probably a mile. And I set it up on a sandbar, and I figured I'll go up the creek a little bit, do some more fishing, and on my way back to the car, I'll pick it up and hopefully have some nice video. Well, I get maybe 100 yards from it, and I look, there's some guy picking up my camera. And I'm like, what in the world? And I start hollering, and he looks at me and starts walking away. And I'm like, nah, this ain't going to happen. Now, I will say in hindsight, it's just stuff. There's no need to have a confrontation over a $200 camera. Having said that, I didn't take my own advice. So down I start coming, and I'm hollering, and he's ignoring me. And then I think he realized I'm not going to give up. So he literally threw it and ran into the woods. I don't know where he came from, what he was doing. He did not have a fishing pole, but had he wanted to stand and fight and I had gotten close to him, that could have potentially turned into a lethal force situation miles from a road. So, again, that was one of those I would have never thought that out in the middle of absolute nowhere, somebody'd be stealing my camera, even after I said, hey, that's mine, leave it alone. And he was still going to keep going. So just those kind of situations you never foresee happening, but I always carry a gun. And again, the operative thing on the last thing was I should have just let it go when I yelled at him and he turned and kept going down the creek. But anyway, that's what could have happened.
I think it would be hard to stand by and just watch somebody steal your anything,
Yeah.
And I think if you have some training and you want to confront someone, dare I say this, safely, from a distance, hey, that's my camera, and then okay.
Yeah.
But then should push come to shove and you get attacked, at least you'd have the ability to defend yourself. Early in our wave runner career, we actually did go out a few times without a gun because we thought, well, it'll be okay. We don't really need to, it'll be okay, right?
Yeah.
People say, oh, I leave my car unlocked because no one's going to steal.
It'll be okay.
Yeah, it'll be okay. And then we started carrying the guns, and sure enough, I mean, there was one time there was a pursuit, and this bad guy went out across the park and then down and then crashed into the water in the bay. And we had been monitoring the pursuit, so we were heading that way on our wave runners. And so we got there, and I don't know who was more surprised, the bad guy or the beat cop, but we blasted up on the beach and jumped out and reached in and took our guns out of the Ziploc baggie, and so these two dripping guys off of a wave runner wearing a helmet, were
That's
holding
funny.
our guns covering this guy. But there you go. What's the rule again? Have a gun.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
So there you go.
Well, another point I wanted to talk about, and again, I've never done this. It's never happened to me. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Is retention. If you are doing something on the water with a firearm, there is a very good chance that you could lose it. Now, if you're, say waiting, it's probably less of a concern. But speaking as somebody who's watched a Spyderco police model knife, and you remember those were real popular back in the day and pretty expensive. I was working on my outboard motor at Raccoon Lake in Indiana. And I forget what I was doing. I think I had line around the prop or something, and I bent over and it fell out of, I think, my pocket. And in slow motion, you boink, and it hit the outboard motor cowling and did like a half gainer with a twist, and then started to go over the side. And I reach out, and it just almost goes right by my hand, and then plunk. And we were in about 10 feet of water. And I even went back when they drained the lake in the winter, because they drain it back enough that you can walk out after the mud dries up and look for that knife, because that was $100 plus knife back in the day. And fortunately, I've never done that with a firearm, but that was the day I realized, if I'm carrying a gun and for some reason it comes out or it leaves the holster inadvertently or whatever, maybe I need to secure it to the boat. So at the very least, some paracord, a lanyard, they make all kinds of these things now. And that's the main reason that nowadays you see like police and special operations, they have lanyards for that simple reason. If you're working in a water environment, once it disappears from sight, it's gone forever and ever. So something to think about if you're taking your gun on the water.
Well, lanyards is a great idea. We actually experimented with them, but the problem on our police boats is that we kept getting tangled up in things.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that it probably didn't make sense. Like if you were a fisherman in Alaska and you had a bear gun or something, I think having it on a lanyard may not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you trip and fall, or you pull it to shoot the first shot, and you trip and fall. Now you lose your gun. Well, no, you pull the lanyard, you have your gun back. Yeah. So it's a good idea. So I would say, I would recommend, if you're around the water and you have a gun, you want to take it with you, is invest in one of those small plastic, clip, hard plastic sealable boxes, because that really is the best way, I think, to carry your gun out there.
Well, as somebody that wears waders a lot, both fishing and hunting, keep this in mind. if you carry on your waist like you normally do. I had one instance, and I can't remember what it was, that I remember I had fallen yet again, and I had water all the way down. And I thought, well, I need to get my gun out of there. And that was the first time I'd ever tried to draw from inside my waders. I discovered you don't draw from inside your waders, whether you're dry or not. So, yeah, it's comforting to have that gun on your hip, but if it's inside your waders, especially if you've got a belt around your waders to prevent flooding, not so much. So, just trying to bring up some ideas of again, the mistakes I've made over the years doing all this stuff. So now if especially when I'm fishing, because when you're hunting, I figure if I'm carrying a shotgun or a rifle, I've got a gun, right? With fishing, what I've gone to now is a chest rig. And I believe mine is made by, throwing a plug for Hill People Gear, I think. And it's really comfortable. And I carry all my fishing junk there. And then in the zippered pouch behind, that's where I carry a full-size Glock and a couple of spare magazines. And I figured I'm fully prepared. I've got reloads. And even if I go down, there's a pretty good chance it'll stay dry. So in that particular case, what I do, since it's fresh water, I don't put any water protection on it, because I figure if I do get the big dunking and the gun gets wet, I just take it apart and clean it. It's no big deal. And that only happens about one of three outings. So life is good. But that's my personal setup. And I also use that chest rig a lot of times when I go boating or just different stuff. So if I'm out in the boat on, say, the Great Lakes, I may add a small paracord lanyard or something inside, which works out nice. And I figure if I've got the gun and something happens, it's not going to go 100 feet down in 50-degree water. So,
well, this may actually be a classic situation where, what are those inexpensive single shot funny Altor,
yeah.
That actually might be a perfect situation,
Yep.
for one of these, because I think you could probably dunk it as much as you want without essentially hurting anything.
Yeah.
And then squirt it out with some WD-40. Yeah. You're probably good to go. Load one of those with a 9mm something shot cartridge or whatever you think is appropriate, and then who cares? And there it is.
Well, I've considered it because I just saw, I think they released something else, maybe a polymer or something, because they now are threaded for the barrel. So they were talking about with a silencer, it's really quiet because there's no action. So if we've got subsonic rounds, it doesn't make any noise. But I got to thinking, I've never tried this yet, even though I know they'd send me one. But I thought that might be handy for a situation where maybe you want to keep it readily available, whereas your main gun might be in the box under the console or inside your waders. So if you needed a gun right now in a hurry, that would be at least a gun you could get to and buy you enough time to get to a primary gun. So again,
that's a good idea.
Well, the idea here is I don't think there's one size fits all, because there's so many different situations and activities that people do. But I'm just trying to throw out some ideas of, again, having made a whole bunch of mistakes and tried stuff that did and didn't work during all my waterborne adventures. So anyway, I'm still intrigued by the Altor concept, and I can see it being very useful around the water.
I think you need about 6 of them in a bandolier. Across your chest, and then
we talked about that.
And then you could be a pirate while you're paddling your kayak. So
exactly.
All right. Well, we probably beat this into the ground, huh?
Yeah, I think so. But again, I think my goal here was just to raise some ideas, and that's part of the fun for me is the creativity to think of how can I carry a gun safely, but still in a manner that it's reasonably easy to get to, but protected from the elements. And I would say if you're watching us on YouTube, leave us some comments down in the bottom. Let us know how you carry your gun when you're on the water, because there's a million solutions or more to this problem, and I'm always willing to learn myself, because I'm always finding a way to fall or lose gear over the side or sink my boat or have it fall off the trailer like the last time I took it up to Lake Michigan. That's another story in itself. But anyway, So, well, Roy, I appreciate you taking the time. And now that it's, as I said in the beginning, hotter than hammered hell, I think you need to take your golf, and that's not a golf cart. It's a easy go. Take it down to your new pool, and you and the dogs go swimming. But you'll always have a gun with you.
Yep, my new Altor option.
There you go. Well, I hope my chat with Roy Huntington gave you a few tips on how to keep your guns safer when you're playing in the water during this hotter than hell summer. Before we go, we need to mention our great sponsors that make it possible to have the Guns Magazine podcast. First and foremost is 4patriots.com. For all of your preparedness supplies and needs, visit 4patriots.com. That's the number 4, the word patriots.com, and enter the code GUNMAG at checkout. You get 10% off your first order. What a great deal. That's 4patriots.com. Use the code GUNMAG. Also, if you're into precision shooting and riflery, visit Creedmoor Sports. They've got everything you need to make your rifle more accurate and make those hits at long distances. That's creedmoorsports.com. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody here at Guns Magazine and FMG Publishing, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you, now get out there and get shooting.